Welcome to Head to Head. I'm Jordan Morandini. October has finally arrived and Halloween's coming up quick. David, what you dressing up as?
I'm David Horak. I could go for the common clown, but I don't have to change any of this to get into costume. We're going Head to Head right now. Welcome to Head, everyone. We begin episode 2 with the Valpo football team. Last weekend was an absolutely brutal defeat for the Crusaders as they led Morehead State all the way until Morehead State scored a game-winning touchdown with just 22 seconds left. Just what is your reaction to that game?
I mean, obviously, David, extremely frustrating. I mean, there's no question about it. This is a game where they were heading in. They had the chance to get the third straight win. And it was a very important third straight. I think we touched on it last week. Since 2004, this team hadn't won 3 straight games. This was the opportunity. They go to Morehead State. They put themselves in a great position to win that game. 26-21, led throughout the fourth quarter all the way down to 22 seconds. And Morehead State finds the end zone, converts the 2-point conversion. Valpo just didn't have enough time. But you have to look at this game now. You have to look at it. Look, they lost. Now you have to look at it from a bright side. Jarrett Morgan, another 100-yard game. You know, he's running the ball extremely well. You look at your playmakers in Jean Rene, Frank Katrine. You were able to get both of them involved. Rene had 4 catches, 88 yards, and a touchdown. Katrine, only 1 catch, and that's something that I would expect moving forward. Crusaders need to get him a little bit more involved, I think, Frank Katrine. But he scores. Other than that, though, you know, you just needed that defense to get the one stop, and they weren't able to when you needed it most.
What I don't understand is the fact that this team is known for being really, really explosive in the first half. But in the second half, it either at least starts to coast down, or they really just cannot produce in the second half as well as they do in the first. And what's weird is that Morehead State, historically, 2 years ago, it had the same thing happen to them. It was within the final minute or two, Morehead State controlled the clock on offense, and they got the go-ahead touchdown or field goal, whatever the case. And it was absolutely painful to see the team come back home and to see all of that work for nothing, for a loss. It's just absolutely heartbreaking. Now, there are many, many reasons that could have prevented this loss from happening. Like, obviously, instead of them giving up a field goal on 4th down on the 2-yard line or so, they instead obviously had to settle for, they could have gone for it on 4th down. And they could not run the ball outside, and they just decided, you know what, it's better to be safe than sorry, but that was the difference maker right there. Plus, 17 plays across the entire field. How in the world can you give up that much offensive production from the Eagles, in which you shut them down all game long? Can you make sense of that? I really just can't.
Yeah, extremely frustrating. In that situation on the 2-yard line, they decide to take the points. And then, you know, it ends up backfiring. It ends up backfiring in a 3-point loss. The spread this weekend against Drake is 7.5. So it'll be interesting. I mean, this is definitely a winnable game for the Crusaders, so we'll see if they can, you know, make that push and try and get back on the winning track. But now it's time to transition into women's soccer. And now back-to-back wins over Milwaukee and Green Bay over the past week. They're undoubtedly, David, moving in the right direction. But what more do you need to see, I should say, from this team to really consider this team a Horizon League contender?
They really are all banging cylinders at this point, but what really needs to make this good team into a great team heading towards conference play is communication. They really did lack that, especially in that 1-0 overtime loss to Detroit, where Tess Barrett was red carded 18 seconds in, and the defense gave way through that breakaway. And so when you really look at this team in terms of the talent on the offensive side with April Cronin, Corey Griffith, and also throw in, for good measure, Robin Wenzel, as well as Natalia Conto, whenever she transitions to that forward and midfielder position from the defensive side, you really see the potential this team has. Addie Johnson, of course, how can I forget her name? They have the chemistry and the camaraderie needed to bring this team together in the worst of situations. Defensively, Natalia Conto, Allie Quillen, and Grace Rogers have really brought this team buckled down in the clutch, in the most clutch moments possible to make a defensive stop. And of course, Tess Barrett. What more can we say about her goalkeeping abilities since she stepped in for Sydney Galvez-Daly? Drew Moulton also did a fantastic job in the game that Tess Barrett was red carded for. So when you really look at the team as a whole, how do they come together and produce more wins and more advantage, more field position, more secured possessions over time, especially in conference games, they got to buckle down communication. We saw the best of them, you and I, in the broadcast from time to time for the women's soccer team. We see them when they are verbally communicating to the point where you can hear them up in the booth. You really start to see them defensive stops and offensive breakaways on the wing. And if not, then at least they get corner kicks here and there. A lot of double-digit corner kick games have happened whenever they talk, and talk. That's what I see. That's the one key feat that they are missing to prevent them from going from good to a great team.
Yeah, and you touched on Tess Barrett. It was nice to see her, especially, after that game off against Milwaukee, come back and post a shutout against Green Bay this past weekend. So that was a nice thing to see. Also, it really seems like teams are game planning hard right now for April Cronin, and it's paying off big for Corey Griffith on the other wing. I think that's really paying dividends for this Valpo team, having that second scorer in Griffith. It's allowing them to really spread the field. It's going to be interesting moving forward now. Will opposing defenses start to, game plan a little bit more for Corey Griffith, and maybe we'll see April Cronin open up things. But yeah, those are two things that I wanted to touch on. One thing I want to see moving forward, this is now 3 straight conference games. You touched on Detroit, Milwaukee, and of course Green Bay. 3 straight games without a first half goal, so it'll be interesting to see if they can push through and start getting off to a little bit quicker starts moving forward.
There's really no balance to how you can defend against Corey and April in the long run. They have yet to find that formula to defend against both of those players. We'll see how it pays off. After struggling through conference play, opening up 1-3, Valpo Volleyball traveled to Western Illinois yesterday, shutting out the Leathernecks 3-0. So going down the road, Jordan, was this what they needed to get back on track?
David, you look at this, it's a non-conference game. It is not a good Western Illinois team. They were 4-17. They had losses already to both Oakland and Green Bay, 2 other Horizon League teams. Obviously teams that are near the top of the Horizon League Conference, but still teams that you expect the Crusaders to compete with when the time comes. I think in a way this is the type of win they needed. They needed a little bit of an easy win following a little bit of a struggle in the opening of conference play. But I don't think, I'm not going to say this is just a huge deal because they took care of a team they were supposed to. Now we need to see if they can really carry this on to conference play. I mean, opening up 1-3, you're still dealing with a lot of injuries. We saw Emily Campbell is kind of slowly getting back into the groove of things. Need to see a couple of other injured players as well get into the groove of things. As the season continues, it'll be interesting. We talked last week, how long can this team hang on? They're going to need to start to pick it up quick. You do not want to open up, 1-4, 1-5 in Horizon League play.
How can you compete in a very, very competitive Horizon League without your best players healthy? Because when you look at Allison Ketchum, who has not played for weeks, Emily Campbell, still not 100% yet, Jamie Laheda and Kayla Courier, for reasons, Kayla Courier did not play Friday and Saturday, and also you have Jamie Laheda not playing Saturday, but after having a pretty stellar Friday against Youngstown State despite the loss. When you really add that all together, how in the world can a mid-major conference, which is underrated as which should be one of the most competitive volleyball conferences in all of Division I, aside from the Big Ten with Penn State, but when you really look at this entire conference as a whole, this really does not add up. Absolutely 100% on board with you, because how in the world can Valparaiso compete against Cleveland State and Youngstown State, and even teams like UIC, which they had to rally back with the players that they've had healthy after a pretty bumpy road here and there with the players that they're given. They have to dig down to their freshman Alana Brown from time to time. So to answer the question, how long can they last? Not very long at this point. And they gotta answer the question soon, who's gonna replace Kayla Courier and who's gonna replace Jamie Laheda if they continue to sit the bench and rehab their injuries. And we don't know how Emily Campbell's gonna turn out. That's gonna be a scary situation for yet another senior. And Allison Ketchum, she may have another year to go, but if Karen Avery wants another conference championship, which is of course the usual expectation for this program, she's gotta have all of her senior leaders ready to lead by example once they're healthy. And unfortunately that is not the case for now, and she has to dig deep into depth to see which players can be the utility player in playing multiple positions consistently and at their peak spot. We'll see.
Yeah, an extremely tough part as well. 3 conference road games coming up back to back to back. Northern Kentucky, Wright State, Oakland. So we'll see if they can start to make a little bit of a run. And now we're going to transition into men's soccer. Last week we talked about if this was the year. And now, since then, they've picked up 2 more quality wins in Oakland and Omaha. 4 straight W's, 6 of their last 8 with a draw in there as well. David, is there anything at this point that can stop this team? They are on fire.
Basically nothing. Because how can you, first of all, on the offensive side, just like we did with women's soccer, if they start to game plan against Corey Griffith, then how are they going to defend April Cronin? For the men's side of things, if they're going to game plan against Kendon Anderson, who is one of the better teammates that Mike Avery has under his wing to score and have the unmatched pace of dribbling past his defenders like he did against Oakland, how are they going to defend then Isaiah Madrid, who already leads the team in goals? It's just a dynamic duo that cannot be stopped whatsoever. And they do have other guys like Suleiman Thomas, Ramon Howell, and Okama Thompson and Kevin Fillet that can really add to already a smorgasbord of offensive production and consistency that Mike Avery has had. That's what bled to a 1-0 bloodbath against Oakland because, man, I thought there was going to be an absolute brawl to the absolute death between the Grizz and the Crusaders because of how bad these two want first place in the Horizon League. So when you buckle down on defense with Devin Mason and Kevin Fillet in the backfield with a goalkeeper of the year, reigning goalkeeper of the year like Nico Campbell, there's no way that this team can be stopped, especially how they played consistently and with grit against Oakland, because how they were able to keep their composure in a high-emotion, high-stakes game like Oakland. There's no way that this Valparaiso men's soccer team can be defeated whatsoever. They already have the communication necessary that Valpo women's soccer can improve on, but they already have the pieces of the puzzle to bring home the hardware. I absolutely agree that there's nothing that this team can be stopped at. I hope you have an argument to counter that because there's basically nothing that can beat this team.
I mean, at this point, this team is firing on all cylinders. I mean, there's no question about it. They have a huge home game this weekend against Milwaukee, so that'll be interesting to see. Milwaukee, a talented team, no question. You touched on the fact that you compared it to women's soccer, and I was actually going to go with kind of that same comparison. The Kendon Anderson and Isaiah Madrid. Yeah, you beat me to it. Isaiah Madrid and Kendon Anderson. It does kind of feel like April Cronin and Corey Griffith in a way. Kendon Anderson only played 3 games. He's already found the back of the net twice. I mean, there's no question about it. The kid has a knack to find the back of the net, and that is crucial to find that second piece that can offer an offensive firepower. This is a team, David, I'm with you. I want to argue on the other side. I'm not sure if I can. They have the goalkeeper there. They've got the defensive line, and the offense is firing with a couple different weapons right now. This team, I'm telling you what, I'm sold on them right now.
Yeah, when you have a high school teammate of Adrian Graham and Nico Campbell on your college team now with Kendon Anderson scoring 3 of the 5 goals in the exhibition match against Lewis, there's no stopping the Valpo offense for the men's soccer team.
Yeah, so we'll take a peek and see if they can continue that this weekend when they host Milwaukee. But after the break, the MLB postseason has finally come at last. Who's better to face the Cubs with tonight's wild card game on the line?
Also, 2 baseball icons took the stage one last time this past week. We'll reflect on their impact on America's pastime. Don't go anywhere.
Good morning, Valparaiso University. What's a better way to start your day than with a new jam? And WVUR has just what you need.
But if you close your eyes, does it almost feel like nothing changed at all? And if you close your eyes, does it... If Daniel won't change your mind, baby, right.
Broadcasting sports, news, weather, and music on air, online, and on campus. WVUR is my jam.
National League wildcard game is tonight between the Giants and the Mets. Setting aside our picks for now, Jordan, who would be better opposition? Who would be better for the Cubs in the NLDS to give us quite a show?
Yeah, this is an extremely tough question, David. You look at it from a Cubs fan's perspective, and you probably don't want to see really either of these two teams, because obviously you look at the Giants, they're a team who has had unbelievable postseason success. World Series 2010, 2012, 2014, and oh look, it's another even year now in 2016. That is something, no question, that has to scare the Cubs fans a little bit. And then you look at it from a perspective of their pitching staff. A lot of experience, a lot of big game experience. You have Madison Bumgarner. He's throwing tonight, so at least with that, you won't see him in Game 1 of that NLDS, but still, Madison Bumgarner, you have Johnny Cueto and Jeff Samardzija, two other top-line pitchers in that lineup, and of course the experience in that lineup with Buster Posey, Hunter Pence, to name a couple who have already played in multiple World Series. And then you look at it from the other side of things. You look at it, okay, the Mets, a team who took the Cubs out a year ago. They're a team with the top-line pitching, much like the Giants, in Syndergaard. And then you have a couple other guys. You have two younger guys throwing due to injuries to a lot of their top-of-the-line stars. You also have Bartolo Colon, who seems like he's been throwing for about 30 years now. And then you look at, from an experience side, you have Cespedes, you have Jose Reyes, who's played in big games, Curtis Granderson. Those are three other guys who have had big game experience. But in my opinion, if you're a Cubs fan, I think you would rather play the Mets here. There's just something about the Giants in that even year. There's something about that pitching staff, Bumgarner, Cueto. I don't like that matchup necessarily, especially for an NLDS matchup.
Yeah, I really see the Mets being the better team to play the Cubs in terms of setting themselves up competitively for the postseason. Because if you want to be ready for anything and everything other than bad luck for the Cubs, you do want to play one of the best teams in terms of offensive production to really test Jake Arrieta and Hamill and Lackey, to say the least. And when you look at the Mets, you have a veteran in Curtis Granderson, which, to say the least, is one of the more veteran and more experienced outfielders that this Mets team has to offer. And yes, they did come up big with a World Series appearance, and they've really have come up big against teams that unexpectedly were supposed to beat them in years past. And so, in terms of a shattered expectations point of view, the Mets is who the Cubs should face to really prepare themselves for further down in the playoffs. Now, as for a Cubs fan watching this program, who do you think they want to face? They want to face the Giants because, they really have had a bump in the road here and there with a couple of batters and a couple of pitchers as well. But I think the Mets have really shined recently in the postseason, and that's going to scare Cubs fans to go with San Francisco because they really were this close in a couple of games recently, and that's why I'm going to go with the Mets here in terms of better competition, a better opponent for them to face in October, especially after the wild card tonight. But I'm going to go with the Mets for my prediction tonight. Who do you got?
Tonight, again, I think the Giants are the better team. I think Bumgarner has the bigger game experience over Syndergaard, so I do have the Giants tonight. A little disagreement. Nothing wrong with that. Nothing wrong with that.
It's about time.
And now we're going to transition to Odell Beckham Jr., who is currently one of the NFL's most renowned wide receivers. He had a disappointing day against the Vikings with only 23 receiving yards, clearly due to the antics against Vikings cornerback Xavier Rhodes. David, you have to start touching on this with Odell Beckham Jr. Just how much is his ego affecting his performance?
A lot, because when you are the most popular wide receiver, fantasy as well as in real life, you really have to keep yourself under control. And the mental game, how you control yourself off the field will obviously affect yourself on the field. I mean, look at his stats. It's absolutely ridiculous. He has played this so far 4 games, 22 catches for 39 targets, 303 yards, 13.8 average. That's so 13.8, just below 14. That's below his average of 15.1 and 14.3 in both years past. And so when you take it from a statistical point of view, obviously the numbers don't lie. But when you look at himself as a player, yes, his capabilities are boundless, but only if his mind is in the right spot. And if it is on his playing ability, on his goals to become the best receiver, to hopefully lift off this team into a playoff contention, at least for the New York Giants, struggling with Eli Manning and an offensive line like that, you got to focus on yourself and not on a Twitter battle with some other guy that you barely even know. So I don't know. It's absolutely ridiculous and inexcusable for OBJ to act like this.
Yeah, no touchdowns through 4 games. You have Eli Manning kind of calling you out a little bit after that last game, said he needs to tone it down a little bit. Those penalties are hurting, obviously, the unsportsmanlike penalties. So, yeah, I think he needs one big game right now to regain that confidence, but we'll see if he can get it. He's got to tone down the ego that he's working with.
So back to baseball. 2 of baseball's iconic legends officially turned in the towel last week. No longer will we see David Big Papi Ortiz in the batter's box, nor will we hear the wonderful words of Dodgers broadcaster Vince Scully in the press box. Looking back at their long tenure careers, how have these two changed the culture of America's pastime?
I mean, you have to look at Vince Scully first. 67 years in the booth, just an all-time great, one of the best ever. I mean, a lot are, as he's retiring now, considering him the greatest ever when it comes to baseball broadcasting. It's just unbelievable. I mean, I've read a lot about him lately. And people just touched on the fact that, he's a storyteller. And a lot of the broadcasters that are getting introduced to the games nowadays, they focus so much on analytics, so much on the stats, so much on all of that. Vince Scully is a storyteller, and that is what kind of has separated him throughout the year. I mean, 67 years, that career is absolutely unbelievable. And then you look at Big Papi, 17 walk-off hits in his career, 11 of them home runs, a lot of them, it seems like, always in big moments. And now the Red Sox, they're in the postseason. So can they make one last run for Big Pop? You look at him, 286 average, 540-plus home runs, 3 World Series rings. It's going to be really interesting, David, when it comes to the Hall of Fame talk with him. He did have the one failed drug test. Could have been linked to steroids. They never really fully announced. But it's going to be interesting to see how that ends up.
Big Papi was always one of the most influential players in New England. He really brought the Red Sox organization together, especially during and after the 2004 World Series championship. What more can we say about that? And he has definitely led this team through at least American League East Division championship contention. But for Vince Scully, the great communicator, this is absolutely, it's speechless to know that one of the baseball greats of baseball broadcasting is already done. And 67 years, but I want to expand that to 80 years ago. On this final game, he was a little red-haired kid that walked by a Chinese laundry, and he found his love for baseball by looking at the World Series score of the Giants and the Dodgers. It just really, really broke my heart to see such a long tenure of a broadcaster go. But at the end of the day, we'll never experience that ever again, and it's going to be tough for whoever fills in his vacancy to go to match the storytelling capacity that Vince Scully has for baseball.
And now it's barely October, and we've already seen, David, some crazy postseason action with the extra inning thriller last night in Toronto with the Edwin Encarnacion walk-off home run. The Fall Classic could not come any sooner, but so who do you have in that World Series and taking home the trophy? Give me a little prediction.
I do not want to jinx anything, but I want to go with the Cubs because as much as we want to say 103 wins makes the difference, they really did Joe Maddon did a fantastic job in investing in the offseason or not in the offseason, in the post playoff contention, clinching and the home field advantage clinching games that they needed to break. He also invested in his depth. And because he invested in the depth on the mound as well as in the batter's box for those pinch hitting for key players down the road like Rizzo, he really set the stage for any players that coincidentally get injured down the road. I really have the Cubs coming up big, and I have them facing off against the Rangers. Texas doing a fairly good job in staying in the race and not getting too ahead of themselves so quickly.
Yeah, I have the Cubs out of the NL, and then on the AL side of things, I do like that Rangers-Blue Jays matchup. I think that's potential. Whoever wins that, I think, gets out and it ends up in the World Series from an AL side of things. You never know. Blue Jays can always get hot from that wild card game. But stay right where you are, because after this break, it'll be time for our Fast Break segment. Don't go anywhere.
Good morning, Valparaiso University. What's a better way to start your day than with a new jam? And WVUR has just what you need.
But if you close your eyes, does it almost feel like nothing changed at all? And if you close your eyes, does it...
If dying young won't change your mind, baby, right.
Broadcasting sports, news, weather, and music on air, online, and on campus. WVUR is my jam.
Time for the fast break. Start the clock. First up, Valpo women's soccer. Which player will end up with more goals this season, Cronin or Griffith?
Cronin has the lead right now, 6-5. I like Griffith, though. She's having a little bit more opportunity with defenses focusing on Cronin. Valpo goalie Nico Campbell has 3 straight shutouts with 8 games remaining in the regular season. Does he have at least 3 more in his system?
Low-caliber teams like IUPUI in the schedule, is that even a question? Given the rough road Valpo volleyball has, where do you see them finishing in the Horizon League?
I like them in the middle of the pack. I think they're suffering too many injuries to try and make a jump, but they're not a lower-tier team. Crusaders men's basketball already showing off their skills on Twitter with Devon Walker slamming it down during practice. David, are you impressed?
Already on SportsCenter Top 10. I'm expecting more out of him. Finally, Valpo football set to host Drake Saturday, 1 p.m. kickoff. Who you got?
I like Drake. I like Drake. Sadly, I think the Crusaders it's not the right time. As 7.5 favorite at home.
Yep, I got them too, at least by a touchdown. That'll do it for this edition of Head to Head.
We'll be back on Thursdays from now on, starting next week on the 13th.
Follow us on Twitter at VUTV Sports for the latest.
Until then, we'll see you on the flip side.